I'm Thelma, 68 years old, a retired school teacher from Boston. Last month, I had heart surgery and felt so vulnerable. I sent a simple message to our family chat asking for a ride home from the hospital. My son Richard replied, "Call a taxi, I'm watching TV." His wife Sylvia added, "Stay in the hospital for another month. It's so nice without you." Their words cut deeper than my surgical scar. But something unexpected happened that evening that changed everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from and hit that subscribe button as I share how life can surprise you when you least expect it. My life before surgery was quiet but comfortable. I've been widowed for 5 years now since my husband Thomas lost his battle with cancer. We had been married for 42 years, and adjusting to life without him has been challenging every single day. Richard is my only child. We were incredibly close when he was growing up. I was a single mom for most of his childhood after his father left us when Richard was just 4 years old. We weathered every storm together, from tight finances to school bullies. I worked 3 jobs sometimes to make sure he had everything he needed. When he graduated college, I felt like we had accomplished something amazing together. Things changed when Richard met Sylvia. She was beautiful, ambitious, and seemed to make Richard happy, which is all I ever wanted for him. But from the beginning, there was a subtle hostility from Sylvia toward me. Small comments about my appearance, questioning my decisions, or making plans that deliberately excluded me. It started with holiday gatherings scheduled when she knew I couldn't attend, then evolved into more obvious slights. I tried everything to build a good relationship with her. I offered to help with their wedding planning, but was told my ideas were outdated. I bought them thoughtful housewarming gifts that were quietly donated or relegated to their basement. I even kept my opinions to myself when they made decisions I worried about, like buying a house well beyond their budget. Over the years, I watched Richard change from the caring, considerate son I raised to someone distant and dismissive. Our weekly Sunday dinners became monthly, then quarterly, then only on major holidays. Phone calls went unanswered for days. My birthday last year was acknowledged with a text message 3 days late. My heart issues began developing about a year ago. At first, it was just shortness of breath while climbing stairs. Then, chest pain that I tried to ignore, attributing it to stress or indigestion. When I finally saw a doctor, the tests showed significant blockage that would require surgery. The doctor was clear this was serious, and I would need support during recovery. I told Richard and Sylvia over dinner at their house. Richard seemed concerned but distracted, checking his phone throughout the conversation. Sylvia asked if my insurance would cover everything, seeming more worried about financial implications than my health. They promised to help with transportation to and from the hospital and to check in regularly during my recovery. As the surgery date approached, I hoped that this serious health situation might bring us closer. I thought perhaps Sylvia would see past whatever issues she had with me, and that Richard would remember how we'd always been there for each other during difficult times. I cleaned my house thoroughly before admission, stocked the refrigerator with easy meals for when they might visit, and even put fresh sheets on the guest bed in case either of them needed to stay over. The night before surgery, I called Richard to confirm he would drive me to the hospital early the next morning as promised. He answered quickly, sounding harried, and informed me that an important work meeting had come up. He suggested I take a taxi instead. I must have sounded disappointed because he quickly added that he and Sylvia would definitely pick me up after discharge. I believed him. The morning of my surgery was terrifying. At 68, any major procedure carries significant risks, and heart surgery particularly so. I took a taxi to the hospital in the dark, the driver kind enough to help me with my small overnight bag. The hospital staff were efficient and compassionate, helping me check in and prepare for the operation. I couldn't help noticing the other patients with family members beside them holding hands and offering reassurance. I sat alone, filling out forms and trying not to let fear overtake me. A nurse named Patricia seemed to sense my anxiety and sat with me during the long wait, telling me about her grandchildren to distract me from my worries. To my surprise, Richard did show up briefly before they took me to the operating room. He seemed distracted, checking his phone every few minutes and standing near the door as if ready to leave at any moment. He didn't hug me, just patted my hand awkwardly and said he was sure everything would be fine. When a text message came through, he glanced at it, said he had to go, and left with a quick, "Good luck, Mom." I woke up in the recovery room alone, groggy and in pain. The surgery had gone well, the doctor told me, but recovery would take time and care. I kept expecting Richard or even Sylvia to appear, but visiting hours came and went with no sign of them. I told myself they must be busy, that they would surely come the next day. 3 difficult recovery days passed without a single visitor. I called Richard's cell phone twice, but both calls went to voicemail. I sent text messages asking how they were trying not to sound needy or demanding, but received only brief replies, busy at work, and we'll try to stop by soon. The hospital staff noticed. Patricia, who had become my primary nurse, asked gently if there was anyone else she could call for me. The social worker stopped by to discuss my discharge plan and frowned when I mentioned my son would be picking me up. He hasn't been in to meet with us about your care requirements, she noted, concern evident in her voice. By the 4th day, the doctor was pleased with my progress and mentioned discharge the following morning. You'll need someone to drive you home and stay with you for at least the first 24 hours, he explained. Do you have that arranged? I nodded confidently, though doubt was growing by the hour. My son, I said, he promised to pick me up. That evening I called Richard again. This time, he answered sounding irritated. Mom, I'm in the middle of dinner, he said before I could speak. I'm sorry to interrupt, I said, hating how timid my voice sounded. The doctor says I can go home tomorrow. Could you or Sylvia pick me up around 11? Tomorrow, that's not good for us, he replied. I have meetings all day and Sylvia has her yoga class and lunch with friends. I see, I said, my heart sinking. Maybe the day after. Look, Mom, we're really swamped this week. Can't you just take a taxi like you did on the way there? The dismissal in his tone hurt more than my healing chest. I explained that the hospital required someone to sign me out and receive instructions for my care. Richard sighed dramatically, as if I were creating problems deliberately. Let me talk to Sylvia and get back to you, he said finally, then hung up without saying goodbye. Hours passed with no call back. The night nurse found me crying quietly when she came to check my vitals. Family troubles? She asked kindly. I nodded, embarrassed. My son seems too busy to pick me up tomorrow. That happens more than you'd think, she said, adjusting my pillows. But the discharge policy is strict for a reason. You need support after heart surgery. By morning, I still hadn't heard from Richard. Desperate and embarrassed, I decided to send a message to our family group chat, which included Richard, Sylvia, and 2 of my nieces who lived out of state. At least then, I couldn't be accused of putting Richard on the spot directly. Good morning, everyone, I typed carefully. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm being discharged from the hospital today after my heart surgery, and wondering if anyone might be able to pick me up around 11. The doctor says I can't go home alone. Love you all and thanks in advance for any help. I stared at the phone watching as the message was marked read by each recipient, waiting for responses that would surely come. When they did, I couldn't believe my eyes. Call a taxi, I'm watching TV, Richard wrote. Before I could process this cold response from my only child, another message appeared. Stay in the hospital for another month. It's so nice without you, Sylvia added, followed by a laughing emoji that seemed to mock my very existence. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. At first, I thought it must be some terrible joke that they couldn't possibly be this cruel. I read the messages again and again, looking for some hint that they were teasing that they were actually on their way to get me. But no further messages came. My nieces, who lived in California and Arizona, sent apologetic responses explaining they wished they could help, but were too far away. They asked if I had any friends who might assist me. Their concern only highlighted the callousness of my son and daughter-in-law's responses. A physical pain spread through my chest that had nothing to do with my surgical wound. My heart literally ached with rejection and disbelief. Tears welled up and spilled over before I could stop them. A lifetime of memories flashed through my mind, rocking Richard to sleep during fevers, cheering at his baseball games until I was hoarse working overtime to pay for his college applications, celebrating his every achievement as if it were my own. I remembered the day Richard called to ask for help with the down payment on their house. I had given him nearly all of my savings money I had set aside for my own retirement because his happiness meant everything to me. Now it seemed I meant nothing to him. Patricia found me crying silently in my hospital bed, clutching my phone to my chest as if it contained some precious thing instead of words that had shattered my heart. Mrs. Adams, what's wrong? Are you in pain? She asked immediately, checking my monitors. I shook my head, unable to speak through the tightness in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to show her the messages or admit that my own son had abandoned me. The humiliation was too great. It's nothing, I managed finally. Just overwhelmed about going home. Patricia didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand in hers. Is there anyone who can pick you up today? Anyone at all? I tried to think. Most of my close friends had either moved to retirement communities in Florida or Arizona or were dealing with health problems of their own. My neighbors were kind but not close enough to ask for such a personal favor. I had become increasingly isolated over the years, partly due to caring for Thomas during his illness and partly because Richard and Sylvia's cold treatment had made me withdraw from social situations. I'll figure something out, I said, finally attempting a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. I tried calling Richard directly, hoping that speaking to him might penetrate whatever wall of indifference he had built. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message, keeping my voice steady despite my breaking heart. Richard, it's Mom. I really need your help today. Please call me back. He never did. As lunchtime approached with still no solution for my discharge, a hospital volunteer named Dorothy came into my room with a magazine cart. She was around my age with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Would you like something to read, dear? She asked, then paused, noticing my red-rimmed eyes. Are you all right? Something about her gentle concern broke through the wall I'd been trying to maintain. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything: my relationship with Richard Sylvia's hostility, the cruel messages, and my current predicament. Dorothy listened without interrupting, occasionally patting my hand. When I finished, she sat in the visitor's chair beside my bed. I understand more than you might think, she said. I went through something similar with my daughter years ago. It's a special kind of pain when your child rejects you. She told me she was a retired journalist who still had connections at the local news station. I've been volunteering here for 5 years, she explained, and I've seen too many elderly patients abandoned by family. It's an epidemic nobody talks about. Dorothy leaned forward, her expression earnest. Thelma, would you be willing to share your story not just for yourself, but for others going through this? My first reaction was hesitation. I had always been private about family matters, and the thought of airing our problems publicly made me uncomfortable. Plus, there was the fear of further alienating Richard and Sylvia. I don't want to embarrass my son, I said weakly. You wouldn't need to name names, Dorothy assured me. But stories like yours need to be told. Elder neglect is growing in this country, and most people suffer in silence, ashamed to admit their own children have abandoned them. I thought about other elderly people lying in hospital beds receiving similar text messages, feeling the same cutting pain of rejection. The idea that my experience might help someone else feel less alone was powerful. What would I need to do? I asked. Within an hour, Dorothy had contacted her friend Marjorie, a producer at Channel 7 News. The station had been working on a series about healthcare challenges for seniors, and Marjorie thought my situation would highlight an important aspect they hadn't yet covered. By mid-afternoon, a small news crew arrived at the hospital. The administration gave permission for the interview after Dorothy explained the public interest angle. I was nervous but determined, changing from my hospital gown into the clothes I had packed for discharge, applying a touch of lipstick to boost my confidence. The reporter, a compassionate young woman named Alicia, asked thoughtful questions about my experience. I shared my story without mentioning Richard or Sylvia by name, focusing instead on the broader issue of family support during medical crises. What would you want other families to know? Alicia asked. That aging parents aren't burdens to be discarded, I replied, surprised by my own steady voice. We're still the same people who changed diapers, kissed scraped knees, and sacrificed everything for our children's futures. All we ask is a little kindness in return. The camera followed as Patricia helped me gather my belongings and explained the discharge process. The social worker discussed alternatives for patients without family support, highlighting community resources that were often underfunded and oversubscribed. The final segment showed me calling a taxi service, the hospital staff helping me into the car, and a brief shot of me looking small and vulnerable in the back seat as it pulled away. Throughout the entire process, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and strength. Speaking my truth even anonymously gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Before leaving, Dorothy gave me her phone number. "Call me anytime," she insisted, "and let me know how things go after the segment airs tonight." The taxi driver was a grandfatherly man who carried my bag to the door and made sure I got inside safely. I thanked him profusely, tipping more than I could really afford because his kindness meant so much in that moment. Once alone in my empty house, the full reality of my situation hit me. Simple tasks, like climbing the few steps to my front door, left me breathless and in pain. My doctor had provided clear instructions about medication rest and a heart-healthy diet, but managing all of it alone seemed overwhelming. I made my way slowly to the bedroom, stopping several times to rest. Even changing into comfortable clothes exhausted me. The refrigerator contained the items I'd stocked before surgery, but the thought of preparing even a simple meal was beyond my current capabilities. The physical pain was constant, a sharp reminder with every movement of how vulnerable I had become. But it paled compared to the emotional wound inflicted by Richard and Sylvia's messages. I kept returning to them mentally, trying to understand how my only child could be so callous. Had I somehow failed as a mother? Was this punishment for some parental mistake I couldn't remember? The questions circled endlessly as I settled into my recliner, the only position that didn't aggravate my chest pain. Around 5 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Struggling to my feet, I shuffled to answer it, finding my neighbors Lisa and Frank on the porch with a casserole dish. "We saw you getting out of the taxi," Lisa explained. "We thought you might need a meal." Their kindness brought fresh tears to my eyes. I invited them in, embarrassed by my emotional state, but grateful for human connection. They stayed only briefly, sensing my fatigue, but promised to check on me the following day. After they left, I turned on the television for company as much as entertainment. Flipping through channels, I stopped abruptly when my own face appeared on screen. The evening news was running the segment about my hospital discharge. "Tonight, we bring you a story that highlights a growing crisis in elder care," the anchor announced. Thelma Adams, a 68-year-old retired teacher recovering from heart surgery, found herself without family support during a critical time. The camera cut to my interview showing my composed face as I described sending messages that went unanswered. They had edited out any direct references to my son, focusing instead on the isolation many seniors experience during health crises. A recent survey indicates that nearly 40% of seniors report experiencing some form of neglect from family members, the reporter stated. Healthcare experts worry this number will grow as our population ages. The segment ended with resources for elderly support services and a comment from a geriatric social worker about the importance of family involvement in recovery. Almost immediately after the broadcast, my phone began ringing. Several former colleagues and distant friends called to express concern and offer help. I was touched by their kindness, many of whom I hadn't spoken to in months or even years. Then came the call I had both expected and dreaded. Richard's name flashed on my caller ID. I answered with trepidation. "How could you?" he demanded without preamble, his voice tight with anger. "You've humiliated our entire family on local television." "They didn't mention you by name," I said quietly. "Everyone who knows us will figure it out. My boss called me. Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" In the background, I could hear Sylvia shouting about social media posts and people tagging her in comments about the story. "I'm sorry if it caused you embarrassment." I said, finding strength I didn't know I had. But I was alone after heart surgery, with no way to get home. "You could have called anyone else," Richard shouted. "Who should I have called?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You're my only child, Richard. Who else should care about me if not you?" "Sylvia says we're done with you," he spat out. "No more holidays, no more phone calls. You've made your choice." The line went dead. I sat staring at the phone, wondering how speaking the truth had become an unforgivable offense. My chest ached with both physical and emotional pain, and for a moment, I wondered if I was having another heart attack. Then, the doorbell rang again. Struggling to my feet, I made my way slowly to the door, expecting perhaps Lisa returning with something I needed. Instead, I found myself facing a group of strangers standing on my porch. A woman in her 70s stood at the front, holding a large basket covered with a cloth. "Thelma Adams," she asked with a warm smile. "I'm Maria Washington. My senior support group saw you on the news tonight and we wanted to help. Behind her stood several other seniors and a few younger adults, all holding containers of food grocery bags or bouquets of flowers. I was so shocked I couldn't speak, just stood there with my hand pressed against my healing chest. May we come in? Maria asked gently. You shouldn't be on your feet too long after heart surgery. I nodded, stepping back to allow them inside. They moved efficiently, some heading to the kitchen to organize food in the refrigerator, others arranging flowers in vases they'd brought, still others setting up a medication schedule chart on my refrigerator door. Maria sat with me in the living room explaining that their group provided support to seniors facing challenges. Many of us have been where you are, she said. Children too busy for aging parents feeling isolated and forgotten. As they worked, they shared their own stories. Robert, a retired accountant, told me how his daughter had moved across the country and rarely called. Jennifer, a former nurse, described her son's family forgetting her birthday 3 years running. Each story echoed pieces of my own experience, creating a sense of community and shared pain. They were still there when my phone rang again. This time, it was an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Adams. This is Stephen Wilson. I'm the regional manager at Nationwide Insurance where your son works. My confusion must have been evident in my response. Yes. I saw you on the news tonight. I didn't realize you were Richard's mother until staff members mentioned it. I wanted to personally apologize for any impression that our company policies prevented him from supporting you. We have generous family leave options, specifically for situations like yours. I didn't know how to respond, but it didn't matter because at that moment the doorbell rang again. Maria went to answer it while I continued the awkward conversation. Thank you for calling, I said finally. I appreciate your concern. As I hung up, I heard raised voices from the entryway. Richard and Sylvia had arrived, both looking flushed and angry. They stopped short at the sight of so many strangers in my home. What is this? Richard demanded. Who are all these people? Friends, Maria answered firmly before I could speak. Something Thelma needed today. Sylvia's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the scene. We saw the news, she said coldly. You've turned the whole town against us with your sob story. One of the volunteers, a tall man who had introduced himself as a retired judge, stepped forward. Ma'am, I'd suggest a different tone when addressing someone recovering from major surgery. Richard seemed to deflate slightly, looking around at the gathered group with a mixture of confusion and shame. His eyes settled on the medication chart, the prepared meals, the fresh flowers, all the care he should have provided. Mom, can we talk privately? He asked, his voice subdued. I was about to refuse when Maria touched my arm. We'll give you some privacy, she said, but we're not leaving you alone. We'll be in the kitchen if you need us. As the group tactfully withdrew, Richard and Sylvia sat awkwardly on the couch across from me. For a long moment, no one spoke. My boss called me, Richard finally said. He asked why I needed to watch TV instead of picking up my mother from the hospital. And everyone on my Instagram is sharing that news clip, Sylvia added. People are calling us monsters. I said nothing, waiting. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Richard's composure cracked. I was afraid to take time off, he admitted, his voice breaking. There were layoffs coming, and I thought if I asked for family leave, I'd be first on the list. And you couldn't tell me that? I asked quietly. I was ashamed, he said, looking down at his hands. And then it was easier to just not deal with it. Sylvia shifted uncomfortably beside him. I've always felt like you judge me, she said abruptly. Like I stole your precious son. It's easier to push you away than feel constantly evaluated. Their honesty, however belated, opened something in me. I never meant to make you feel that way, I told Sylvia. I just wanted to be part of your lives. We messed up, Mom, Richard said, tears now flowing freely. Those messages. I don't even know what we were thinking. As soon as I sent it, I knew it was wrong, but then I was too embarrassed to take it back. And then we saw you on TV, Sylvia added, looking so small in that taxi, and I realized how cruel we'd been. From the kitchen came the quiet sounds of my new friends respectfully giving us space, but ensuring I wasn't alone. Their presence gave me strength to say what needed saying. What you did hurt me deeply, I told them both. Not just the messages, but the years of pulling away. I gave you everything I had, Richard, not because I expected repayment, but because I love you. All I ever wanted in return was to know you still cared about me. Richard moved to kneel beside my chair, taking my hand carefully. I do care, Mom. I've been a terrible son, and I'm so sorry. Please give me a chance to make it right. Sylvia remained on the couch, her expression complex. I can't promise we'll be perfect, she said slowly, but I can promise to try harder. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Too much had happened for instant forgiveness. But it was a start, an honest acknowledgement of hurt and a tentative step toward healing. That's all I ask, I said finally. That we try. 1 month after my surgery, my physical recovery was progressing well. The incision had healed into a thin line that would fade with time, and my energy was returning gradually. My emotional healing was following a similar path, slow but steady progress marked by occasional setbacks. Richard had been visiting regularly, though usually without Sylvia. He brought groceries, helped with household chores, and took me to follow up medical appointments. Our conversations were sometimes awkward, both of us navigating new boundaries and old hurts, but there was genuine effort on both sides. After our confrontation, Richard had admitted he needed help processing his emotions and began seeing a therapist. He was learning to communicate more honestly about his fears and frustrations instead of withdrawing or lashing out. It was strange to see my son now in his 40s finally growing up in ways I hadn't realized he still needed to. Sylvia remained more distant, though she had sent flowers and occasionally joined Richard for brief visits. I tried to see her perspective more clearly to understand how my well-intentioned involvement might have felt intrusive or judgmental to her. We were taking small, careful steps toward a relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation. The most unexpected outcome of my hospital experience was the community that had formed around me. Dorothy, the hospital volunteer who had connected me with the news station, became a dear friend. We met weekly for coffee, sharing stories of our children and grandchildren, offering each other the maternal understanding we sometimes couldn't find in our own families. Maria's senior support group welcomed me warmly, and I found purpose in helping other elderly people facing similar challenges. We organized transportation for medical appointments, meal deliveries for those recovering from illness or surgery, and social gatherings to combat the isolation that often came with aging. The local news station did a follow-up story on our group highlighting the positive community response to my initial interview. The reporter interviewed several members focusing on how seniors were supporting each other when family systems fell short. We're not replacing families, I explained on camera. We're creating an additional support network that recognizes the unique challenges of aging. The publicity brought donations and volunteers, allowing us to expand our services. I found myself busier and more fulfilled than I had been in years, turning my painful experience into something positive that helped others. Richard watched the follow-up segment with me, sitting quietly in my living room as the reporter described our growing initiative. When it ended, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said. "You took something horrible that we did and created something beautiful from it." "That's what mothers do," I replied simply. "We find ways to keep going, to keep caring, even when it hurts." We still had difficult moments. Sometimes Richard would cancel visits at the last minute, triggering my fears of abandonment. Occasionally, I would make a comment that Sylvia interpreted as criticism, setting back our fragile progress. But we were talking about these issues now instead of letting resentment build silently. My heart surgery had revealed weaknesses, not just in my physical heart, but in the heart of my family. The healing process for both was ongoing, requiring patience care and honest attention to pain. I had learned that family isn't just defined by blood, but by who shows up when you need them most. Sometimes that includes biological family. Sometimes it's the community you build around yourself. The cruelty of those text messages still hurt when I remembered them, but they had also led me to discover strength I didn't know I possessed. I learned that speaking truth, even painful truth, can be an act of courage rather than betrayal. I discovered that vulnerability, rather than making me weak, could connect me to others in powerful ways. Most importantly, I realized that my worth wasn't determined by how my son treated me. I had value as a mother, a friend, a community member, and simply as a human being deserving of dignity and care. That knowledge gave me the confidence to set boundaries while remaining open to reconciliation. Sometimes the darkest moments reveal who truly cares, and while my son's text message broke my heart, it was the hearts of strangers that helped put mine back together. If you're facing family rejection or feeling abandoned, please know you're not alone. There are communities waiting to embrace you and strength within you that hasn't yet been tapped. Have you ever experienced family members letting you down when you needed them most? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below and remember to like and subscribe for more real life stories of challenge and resilience. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the support you deserve, whether from family or the community that becomes your chosen family.